Let's spend just a few minutes talking about groups. We know that with groups, it's two or more individuals interacting and interdependent who come together to achieve a particular objective. There can also be formal groups, and when we talk about a formal group, that's defined by organization structure. An informal is neither formally structured nor organizationally determined. It might even just be a friendship group that you have. We can also, when we talk about groups, look at the four type of groups that are out there. Command, when we talk about a command group, that's determined by the organization's chart. So it would be where you fall into the order of your organization. Subordinates that report to a manager would be an example of that. A task group is a group that works together to complete a job or a task. Sometimes it might be cross-command. Some of you might work together on a task team in a job, or maybe even as a college student you've worked as a task team. An interest group is where people get together and form a group to affiliate to attain a specific objective of some type of shared interest. And then there's friendship groups. It's where members have one or more common characteristics. And usually these are social alliances, and they're frequently outside of work. Why do people join groups? Well, there's just a lot of reasons that people will end up joining groups, and a lot of reasons, and then again, there's no simple reason that people join groups. There is a security of it, because you know by joining a group you can reduce your insecurity of having to stand alone. People feel stronger when they're a part of a group. They have fewer self-doubts, they're more resistant to threats when they're a part of a group. Also status. We know that if you're included in certain groups, it's viewed as important by others. It also provides recognition, status for its members if you're a part of that. It can tie to self-esteem, so that's a reason why people join groups. It gives you a feeling of self-worth. That is, in addition to conveying status to those outside of the group, membership also gives you or the person increased feelings of worth, because you have been asked to be a part of this group, or you're included as a part of the group. And then there's just simple affiliation. Groups can fulfill your social needs. People enjoy the regular interaction that comes with the group membership. For many of these people, it could be on-the-job interactions that's their primary source for fulfilling their needs of affiliation. It can also be reaching outside the organization. I have a bunco group that I've been a part of for 30-something years, and they're my friends, and I enjoy being with them, and we enjoy affiliating together. Power, what cannot be achieved individually, and sometimes becomes possible when you're part of a group, because we know that there is power when it comes to numbers. And then just goal achievement. Sometimes it just takes more than one person to accomplish some particular task. So you need that people pool of talents, knowledge, or power. In such instances, management is going to rely on the use of a formal group, because they want to achieve a certain task, or they want to achieve something that they know that it's going to come through a group. And then when we look at the basic group concepts or basic group properties, we know that there are roles, and that's all of us play a role when we are part of our group. We also know there's norms, status, size, and cohesiveness, and we'll talk about these 5. So we know with roles, that is where you are expected to engage in a set of behavior patterns that are attributed to occupying a given position within a social unit. And we know that plays into role identity. It's attitudes and behaviors that are consistent with a role, or even role perception. It's our view of how we're supposed to act in any given situation. And if you think about different groups, or maybe that you've been a part of a group, you know the perception and the role identity. I know that when I was in the MBA program many years ago, I was an English major. So my role in that group was basically to be a part. They knew that I was going to be the English major, so I was going to edit the papers and I was going to take care of situations like that. So I was the person that handled that. But we also had a CEO in there, and he handled the numbers. So you will take a certain role within that group. There's role expectations. It's how others believe you're supposed to act in any given situation. There's also a psychological contract. It's that unwritten agreement between employees and the employer that sets out the mutual expectations. There also could be role conflicts. It's when an individual finds that compliance with one role requirement may make it more difficult to comply with another. So it's understanding that in your groups. There's also norms. That's that acceptable standard of behavior within a group that are shared by the group members. We tell members of a group what they ought and ought not to do under certain circumstances. So there are norms, and when you act outside that norm, then that can cause issues within your group. The Hawthorne studies is one of the great examples of that. A worker's behavior and sentiments were closely related, and you guys, I'll have a video on the Hawthorne studies for you to watch, and it's really interesting to watch that. We know that group influences with the Hawthorne studies were significant in affecting individual behavior. We also know that group standards were highly effective in establishing individual worker output. And interestingly enough, money was less of a factor in determining worker output than were the other group standards, sentiments, and security. So we know once you reach a certain level of compensation, that's not going to be your motivating factor anymore. It's not going to be money, but it will be other issues that play a role in that. We also will look at the conformity in the ASH studies, and you guys have a video on that as well. And we know that members desire to be a part of the group, and they want to avoid being visibly different. And we also know that the level of conformity in the last few years, or say 20 years, has dropped. People don't mind as much anymore of having to conform. So the level of conformity has declined since the 1950s. But we also know still that in about 35% of the trials that people will have some conformity. Deviant workplace behaviors. What we're talking about in deviant workplace behaviors are just where it's that voluntary behavior that violates the organizational norms, and in doing so threatens the well-being of the organization and its members. It's likely to flourish where it's supported by group norms. So if everyone in the group is acting out, and that is typical to happen, then it means that others will follow along with it and do the same. So you need to be careful if you see, and when we're talking about deviant workplace behavior, it's loafing on the job or playing video games instead of actually working. And if that's accepted, then other people will see it and they will follow along with it. Status. This is the socially defined position or rank given to groups or group members by others, because we know that some people are actually more important than others in your group. So what determines status? It's really a power that the person wields over the others, and it's really that person's ability to contribute to the group's goals. And it can also be just that individual's personality characteristics. I mean, some people are just more charming than others, and there are some people that we prefer to be around than others. So that is a lot of times what determines those personal characteristics of who we want to be with. And the impact of status, that's the interesting part, is to understand that high status members of groups are given more freedom to deviate from the norms because we like them. So we allow, if they're high status within our groups, we allow them to get away with more than we would someone that we don't like. And then interaction among the members of groups is influenced by status. And when inequity is perceived, it results in various types of corrective actions and corrective behavior, because people don't like for situations to be unfair. So realizing that and knowing that, we've got to make sure that we treat all of the people in our group the same way. And then cultural differences affect status. I know that when I've traveled internationally and dealing in certain cultures, that they don't behave the same way that we behave, and they view certain things status is different than we in the United States view that. How size affects a group. Smaller groups are faster at completing tasks. We know that individuals perform better in smaller groups, and large groups are consistently better at problem solving. So we know that we have a large group that we're going to get maybe a better result. But we also know that your individuals are going to perform better in a smaller group. Social loafing is just that tendency to expend less effort in a group than an individual. So it's making sure that we don't have stragglers, the people that don't do what they're supposed to do and not pulling their weight with it. Cohesiveness, that's the degree to which members of the group are attracted to each other and motivated to stay in the group. It's also related to the group's productivity. So we know that groups that get along and have a common goal are better. So look at this chart. This is interesting to me. So if we look at this axis and we look at performance norms, if you have high performance norms and high cohesiveness, you'll have your higher productivity. But look at where the moderate productivity, you can still have high performance norms but low cohesiveness, and at that point in time there's only moderate productivity. But if you look at the lowest productivity that's out there, it's where you have low performance norms but high cohesiveness. So if you put low performance norms but you have people that get along, they're not going to have a lot of productivity. So you're better off having low performance norms and low cohesiveness because you get better productivity. So that's always been fascinating to me that it plays out that way. So how can you encourage, how you as a manager can encourage cohesiveness? You can make your group smaller. Encourage agreement within the group goals, increase the amount of time spent together, increase the status and perceived difficulty of group memberships, and then stimulate competition with the other groups, and give rewards to groups rather than individual members, and then just physically isolate the group. That is what I'm going to cover just on groups and group behavior for this point in time. We're going to pick up here in just a little bit and talk about what happened with groupthink, which to me is one of the most interesting phenomenons when it comes to group behavior. But that's all for this for now, and we will pick up in just a little while and talk about groupthink.